Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes a pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 200 of weekly episodes here at The Last Round. We appreciate it if you've been with us since the beginning, since the middle, or maybe this is your first time. Either way, we appreciate you listening, whether you're in your car, you're at home, in the restroom, in the kitchen, in the park, at the gym. Who knows? Who knows where you're at? However you're listening, we definitely appreciate it. Sorry for not giving you guys an episode last week. But we're back this week to double up on all the topics and news that we missed around the sport. So let's jump back into it. A couple Saturdays ago, November 5th, in Abu Dhabi on DAZN, Dimitri Bivol retains his WBA super light heavyweight title and remains undefeated as he gives Gilberto Ramirez his first professional loss over a 12-round unanimous decision win by scores of 117, 111 twice, and 118, 110. So I believe we both picked Bivol. I know I picked Bivol. Did you pick Bivol?
I thought you picked Ramirez.
No, I picked Bivol.
Okay.
Yeah, we both picked Bivol, right?
I remembered I did. Yeah. I thought he'd box him too much. I thought Ramirez is just too big, kind of too slow. Bivol, punches and moves really, really well. Better boxing IQ. And, tended to be the case, to be honest with you. I thought Bivol really probably kind of won that fight in third or fourth gear. I don't think he really needed to step up too much. And you could see Ramirez didn't really have any, plan B or a plan C, going into the later rounds of that fight. And Bivol just kind of went on to show again just how good he is. Great year for him, beating someone like Ramirez, the resume that he had, even though a little bit padded. I think a lot of people still gave him a good chance going into that fight. And then also beating someone, the caliber of Canelo. What a year it's been for him.
I think that when I picked Bivol a couple weeks ago in our last episode when we were previewing this fight, I think a reason why a lot of people, including myself, were having difficulty in a sense in choosing who would likely win in this fight is because Ramirez has never been with an opponent like this after 44, 43, 44 fights. We've never seen him with an opponent like this. This was his first marquee high-level opponent that he's ever faced in over 40 fights. But he's a big guy, and he's obviously, regardless if he hasn't faced anybody up until he lost to Bivol in terms of competitive names, he was undefeated regardless. So he fought 44 guys, 43, 44 guys, and he beat them. And he's huge. Obviously, that's not a secret. He's huge at 175 pounds. He could likely be a cruiserweight if he wants. He's huge. He's like 6'3", maybe 6'4". I don't know. He's a pretty big guy. So with all those circumstances, I guess you can call them, or those X factors, there could have been, he could have went in there and just went for it. And we didn't know because we didn't have essentially a measuring stick to compare him to somebody against like the caliber of Dimitri Bivol. But because of Bivol, especially coming off of the momentum against Canelo and having that Eastern European style, and he's just a textbook boxer who can just get you with combos, come in, has great footwork, very accurate. I think I tipped it to Bivol just because of that. His, the Eastern European style. He's got the momentum, being somebody like Canelo, biggest win of his life. And I just think he was too technical for somebody like Ramirez. Bivol's the type of guy that if you can rewind Ramirez's career, Bivol's the type of guy that he should have faced maybe after facing maybe 2 or 3 solid 175 pounders in terms of maybe other guys who have been world champions or highly ranked contenders. And then you fight somebody like Bivol. This is the reason why, for so many years, nobody wanted to fight Bivol, because he's doing exactly what people were afraid of him doing. The opponents were afraid of. He's a high risk. He's an extremely high risk and a low reward. So you fight a guy like Bivol who doesn't have the name recognition. I mean, the last 6-7 months, obviously since being Canelo and now being Ramirez, obviously his profile has went up, so it's great for him. But prior to that, nobody, he's been a world champion for how many years? Maybe 3-4 years. He's been a world champion for a long time, multiple years, several years now. But I mean, we all know how this boxing game works. You have to, especially for these higher profile fighters, these world champions, especially in these higher weight classes, you have to bring the money to the table in order for it to make sense. Especially if you're, even Bivol could have signed with somebody like PBC or Top Rank or whatever, but then they would have had to give him a fight with one of their main guys. I mean, why didn't somebody like Top Rank pick up Bivol and put him against Ramirez, have them both signed, and then put them together on an ESPN show? I think it's because they knew, like, Ramirez is probably the more fan-friendly fighter. They can make more money on somebody like Ramirez, where Bivol's, he's a great guy. He's very respectful. He's a nice guy. I mean, we've met him in person, and he's a great guy, but he's dangerous. He's dangerous as a boxer, obviously. And he doesn't at that point, he didn't bring money to the table. So he was too good for his own good, which is crazy to say, but that's what happens in boxing. And I mean, if you want to rewind a little bit, going back earlier this year, you got to give credit to Canelo, who's like, hey, I'm going for it. I'm going to go after him, even though I think a lot of hardcore boxing fans knew that was a dangerous fight. And I think, and you tell me this if you agree with this or not, I think Canelo gave a better showing and was more competitive than Ramirez was. What do you think? Or do you think it was about even? If you had to tip it one way or the other.
That's a good question.
Give me something.
It's a good question. Both of them, I think, were shut out, but I think watching it, because of the power that Canelo has, I probably thought Canelo had a better chance of, just kind of getting that perfect punch and stopping him, whether it be to the head or to the body, just because, Canelo got the power, selects shots, really, really well. Whereas, when I was watching the Ramirez fight, quite late on in the fight, I was kind of like, okay, like, Bivol's going to see this out now. Pardon me. So yeah, I think I would go with Canelo. I was more on the edge of my seat with that one, where you kind of thought, like, Bivol's winning this, but Canelo does have a puncher's chance, even though he was up against someone big. We saw him, knock out Kovalev, and Kovalev is, bigger, thicker person than Bivol. Bivol is, could kind of boil himself down to a super middleweight. He's, one of the smaller light heavyweights. So I think, maybe Canelo, just a tad though, just a tad. And yeah, kind of like you touched on, I think, Bivol now we know why for so long he's been in the shadows, because he doesn't put bums on seats and nobody wanted to fight him. I remember being in the Joe Diaz's gym chatting to his team, and they told me, a while back that they offered, when Callum Smith was the champion, they offered him, I think it was $5 million, they said, to fight Bivol, and his team turned that down, kind of banking on the fact that they would hopefully get the Canelo fight later down the line, which they did. Which they did, and they probably came out ahead, I would imagine, in terms of the amount of money they would have got. You think
Smith made more than $5 million for that Canelo fight?
I think he probably made less than, obviously, the big dogs, like, the Jacobs, who got like 12 million.
Or maybe he made around the same.
I would say around the same, maybe a little bit more, 6-7 million. I don't see him probably making anything more than 8, but
I think he even
I don't
eight's a
know.
lot. I don't think he made more than maybe 6, but that's just
Yeah,
me.
I can't remember what that did on in terms of figures, but I'm sure he did, pretty well. Um, but
But
yeah,
like you said, Bivol, like we just talked about, we've been repeating the last minute or two. This is why nobody wanted to fight him over the last several years, because he's proving everybody right in how they assessed him um, since he's been world champion, essentially, or since he's kind of came into the hardcore boxing fan prominence, I guess. He's doing exactly what people thought he would do. He's too good for his own good, but he doesn't bring the money behind him. If he was putting bums on seats, he was showing selling. Excuse me, he was selling pay-per-views, big marketing behind him, and just he just had a big profile. Then a lot of these guys at 175 pounds would have been like, okay, I'm going to take that risk, because even though if I lose, and there's a chance that I will lose because he's good, I'm going to make a lot of money on following the fight and the event anyways. And my profile will go up. That's the only way you can get significant fights like that, is if your profile is high, if you're good. I mean, if your profile, I mean, look at it this way. Let me pose this question to you. Would you rather have a fighter who has a large profile, who can, I mean, I guess maybe let's look at somebody like Ryan Garcia at the moment. Obviously, he's getting better. We've seen it, but his fame and his profile still exceeds his talent. He's getting closer, but it still exceeds his talent. And if we talked about this a year ago, 2 years ago, the gap was a lot bigger. But he's, seems like he's making money. He's making money for De La Hoya and the Zone. Would you rather have a fighter who has a larger profile, who can draw some money like that over the course of a 5 or 10 years, or have a fighter who has a below average profile but is really good, like Bivol?
I think it depends on what you want. As if I'm the manager of the fighter or if I'm the fighter myself, you're looking at making a lot of money and then getting out of the sport, but you're not necessarily maybe winning like world titles, or is legacy important to you? Is being in the history books, being like a world champion or an undisputed champion, does that mean more to you? Because I'm sure the belts, they always say you pick up the belts and the money will follow, but sometimes just having a huge, for example, look at the YouTubers. They're not boxers, they don't have the talent, but they have the following, and some of those guys are making substantially more than boxers who are 1,000 times better than they are, but unfortunately they don't have the following. They've not learned how to do the PR, and they've not managed to make a big social media following, which translates into views and also pay-per-views. So I think it's all in the eyes of what you want as a person. Is being substantially stable and creating a lot of money and legacy for your family, or do you want to be a world title and you want to go down in the history books where you can look up back and say, like, my name's Danny Z and I was the WBC title holder for a year and I beat so and so. Is that something that means more to you? I guess because you see fighters like that. You see fighters who go through their career and they pick the biggest purses against the least resistance. They pick the making money on the easiest path rather than going down, like the hard route, like say like a Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor was at 16 pro fights and he'd fought some absolute killers on the way. Then the money eventually came for him. But probably like you said, like Ryan Garcia, had well selected opponents. Generally people from the division below that they've kind of brought up to the lightweight division to kind of be cannon fodder for him. So yeah, I guess it just depends on what you want as a person.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. But it's, I mean, going back to the whole Bivol thing, it's just, it's so crazy to see. I mean, I'm sure there's other examples if we think critically and long enough, but like I said, he's proven everybody right. He's too dangerous. He's too dangerous, and nobody wants to fight him. I mean, Canelo has been saying that he's kind of going back and forth, saying though he can return in May, even though a couple months back when he lost against Bivol, he said he needed to have a surgical procedure or something, and he probably wouldn't be back until next September because he's been really active there in the last couple of years, and but during the last couple of weeks, there's been some reported interviews with him that he's indicating, or he says that he can come back in May, and that he still wants to avenge his loss against Bivol. And a lot of people are saying that's not a good idea, that it's going to be the same thing. I mean, Canelo might be a little bit more competitive after seeing him once, but, I think Bivol's still going to be the favorite, or at least going to be the favorite in the second fight. I think for Bivol, because I think Bivol has also said that he'd prefer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bivol has said that he'd prefer to unify with Beterbiev first before any other fight. Is that true?
I think that's what he said. Yeah, I think he said he would like to fight Beterbiev, go for the undisputed, and then go down to 168 to then try to become undisputed, twice. Do it obviously light heavy, and then go down and fight, Canelo for all the titles, undisputed to 168, because that's legacy work, isn't it? To be undisputed in two different weight categories is that's an amazing feat, even though technically he's only fighting one fight, and because Canelo has all of those titles, he's lucky enough just to do that one fight. And if he manages to beat him again, he's got all of the belts, where it's a lot harder when you have to individually go around and collect each one, which is a lot harder due to the promotional and getting certain fighters and camps to agree to fight you.
The thing with Bivol, if he gets a Canelo fight again, or if he gets Beterbiev, I guess you could look at it as, he's been out from the outside looking in with a legitimate world title for so many years, but now this last year or so, especially getting that Canelo fight, the Canelo payday, now beating Ramirez, and like I said, likely getting Canelo or Beterbiev next. I guess that patience has kind of finally paid off for him in terms of, financial gain in his career, and then I guess, the attribution of success to him, the credit, because he's been waiting for a long time, and he's not, he's one of those guys, he's never complained. I mean, he's never been vocal, at least. He's kind of one of those quiet guys, just kind of, hey, I'm just going to go in the ring and train, and when it's time to fight, it's time to fight. But kind of touching on what you said, if he goes down to 68, he's been saying that for a couple of years, that he's like, oh yeah, I can go down to 68. Is it possible, do you think, is it possible and or probable, you tell me which word you'd like to use, that if he gets a rematch with Canelo makes him come down to 168 and says, hey, look, I'll give you a shot at my titles at 168 pounds, instead of Canelo going up to 175 again?
I think Canelo's kind of stubborn, though. I think Canelo, due to the fact that he lost at the higher weight division, I could see Canelo wanting to right that wrong at that weight. But maybe, money talks, the chat, the fact that it could be a bigger fight, if by the time that fight comes around, if he's managed to collect all the belts at 175, and then kind of the story is, Bivol, pardon me, Bivol trying to become undisputed again, that could be, like a substantially bigger fight, I guess. And then depending on what the camp's saying, is Reynoso going to turn around and tell him, like, hey, you're going to probably have the ball's going to be in your court. It's going to be more favorable for you to do that fight at 168, trying to drain Bivol a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. Canelo is somebody that he is like one of those people that really does look at legacy because he's made that money. Now he's going around fighting all these bigger guys. He is somebody that wants to be, like a Chavez or something like that. So I could see him kind of putting his foot in the sand and saying like, no, like this is at 175. I lost at 175. The rematch is going to be at 175. I want to right that wrong there. I don't want to fight him at 168. So that's a good question. We'd have to. That's a good question for, somebody to put to Canelo next time. He does some type of interview just to see where, what weight he wants to do that at.
I think it'd be interesting if that happens, though, if he goes down to 168. But if Bivol cannot secure Beterbiev next in an undisputed fight or a unification fight or whatever, is it undisputed or unification?
Which one?
Beterbiev. It'd be an undisputed fight, right?
Yeah.
In an undisputed fight, if he for some reason can't secure that, and for another reason he doesn't get the Canelo rematch, I mean, I think he needs to beat the drum again for 168. Like, okay, well, who at 168 wants to fight me? I feel that Bivol's chances of landing another name or a decent fighter contender between 160 and 175 is even though he's won his last two fights against somebody like Canelo Alvarez and now Ramirez, his profile has went up. So whether it's a little bit, significantly, or just enough, his financial reward side has increased. So it increases the chances that other fighters, other significant name fighters between 168 and 175 will be inclined to step in the ring with him. He's still going to have a difficulty in getting these people in the ring, but I think he has a better chance, obviously, than he did 4 years ago, when he was just stuck in the shadows with the world title. I honestly think that a fight between him and somebody like, even though we really kind of haven't seen him completely tested yet, but a fight between Bivol and somebody like David Benavidez at 175, because I think Benavidez, is he 175 already? I mean, I'd still probably favor Bivol, but I think that'd be a very, very intriguing fight between Benavidez and Bivol at 175 pounds. What do you think?
It would be.
I'd rather see that fight first than see Benavidez against Canelo or something like that.
Well, but Benavidez is obviously, I think it's been official, right? He's fighting Caleb Plant at the start of next year.
Well, I don't think it's official yet, but the fact that there was reports that Benavidez was going to fight, was it Uskatiki?
Yeah, that fell through, and then
that
stepped up. Do
you think, touching on that really quick, I just want to get your opinion on that. Do you think that fell, because that was never officially announced? I don't think. I don't remember receiving an email for it, but do you think that fight was in the planning stages and they were going to announce it, they were getting ready to announce it, or it was getting there, and then when they got the backlash from it, because Uskatiki was like he's been popped in the past, and people want to see Benavidez against somebody else, obviously higher contenders. Do you think maybe they scrapped it, or Benavidez and his team were like, hey, you know what? No, we're gonna, let's go after Caleb Plant, and they dropped it, and now there's like seeds planted for him against Caleb Plant.
If I remember rightly, I think it wasn't down to like the commission, because he popped for like EPO last time. The commission turned around and
is that what happened this time? They declined to sanction him because of that,
and then it came down to Caleb Plant came out saying that he would fight him, and then it's not on BoxRec yet, the Benavidez and Plant fight, but it looks like, according to social media, they both kind of agreed to it. and probably just have to, select a date and a time and where it's going to be, and then I'm sure it'll come out. But that's the fight we've all been waiting for some time, obviously due to the fact that they had that altercation in, was it Mayweather's gym several years ago. So that's a good fight.
I think that's a great fight.
I'll tell you what a fight that came to mind for Beterbiev. So if Beterbiev, sorry, for Bivol, if he manages to beat Beterbiev, and then maybe if he fights Canelo, or if that gets delayed, I think he could move up and fight Jay Opetaya, the guy that beat
a cruiserweight.
Yeah, because Jay Opetaya's only 6'2", Bivol's 6 foot, and he beat Marius Bradus in Australia, and that was a huge surprise. And he could, pick up the IBF cruiserweight world title, because he's not Okoli's humongous.
Yeah.
So the fight, Okoli's going to move up and fight at heavyweight sooner or later.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about Okoli being humongous and all this stuff, and I get it. But look at Usyk. Look at Usyk move up to heavyweight, fight Anthony Joshua, and win twice. And people say, no, he's a cruiserweight. He's not, he's not big enough. His technical boxing won't bring him across the line, because somebody like Anthony Joshua and those guys, Tyson Fury, they're just too big. Well, he's proved them wrong. Could Bivol be that same person at cruiserweight?
I believe so.
Fighting the big guys at cruiserweight.
Yeah. Even though I just said that about Okoli, I think Bivol does have a very similar style to Usyk. Very slippery, great boxing IQ, understands, getting in, throwing a few punches, and getting out. So yeah, I mean,
what if Bivol goes up against Makabu?
Yeah, exactly. Another one, perfect sort of size. He's got the WBC.
Does he still have a title? Does he still have a WBC title?
Yeah, he has a WBC cruiser. He's only 6 foot. So he's the same size as Bivol.
There you go. That's true. That's honestly, I'm sure if Bivol and his team haven't thought about that yet, for some reason or another, they get blocked out again from these big fights in the next year or so. Hey, consider going up to cruiserweight and challenging for a title. You never know, man. And then turning our attention real quick to Ramirez. Where does Ramirez go from here?
Well, that kind of messed up, what was it, the little dream that De La Hoya had of, trying to get him to beat, Mayweather's undefeated record. But I think Ramirez is, surprisingly, he's been around for so long. He's still only 31. He's 44-1. There's plenty of people in that weight division as well. Not necessarily have titles, but, you got like Callum Smith would be a big fight, either here or, back in the UK. Another one, Jean Pascal is still in and around. Pascal's always been a good fighter. Joe Smith, they could link up with Top Rank. Golden Boy, Top Rank seem to get along well. You see both fighters kind of cross over into different promotions. So there's a lot of big fights for him. And Ramirez is always, apart from that fight, Ramirez is pretty much always good TV. He's, just big, bulky, kind of like comes forward, wants to just walk you down. So and he's got, the Mexican fan base behind him. The fights that we've been to where Ramirez is there, he's always brings a good crowd. So he's got plenty of choices left.
Yeah. Either way, it's good that he's only 31. Hopefully this loss doesn't affect him. Sometimes we see fighters who they take their first loss and then they're never the same. So let's see how he bounces back from it. He still has a lot of career left, even though he has 44 fights, so a lot of mileage on that tank. But I wonder how long his deal is with Golden Boy. But they got him to a world title shot against arguably the best 175 pounder in the world. He just didn't pull through. But you can still make some big fights with Ramirez. He just has to stay at either 175 or 200 pounds, and the bigger money fights I would assume are 175 pounds for him, because he can't go down to 168 anymore. Those days are long gone. But either way, as long as this loss doesn't affect him too drastically, I think Ramirez is still going to be okay. He'll still get some significant names, and he'll try to pick up a world title at light heavyweight in the coming years. On the co-main event for the vacant IBF super featherweight title, Shavkat. I'm not gonna try. I never want to try his first name. Rakimov gets the 9th round TKO over Zelfa Barrett, and like I said, becomes the IBF super featherweight champion of the world. Barrett actually, I believe, he actually knocked him down during this fight. And it was a very dramatic, interesting fight, but obviously he ended up being stopped. But what'd you think about this fight, and what'd you think about Rakimov's victory?
It was good to see, Zelfa Barrett, come over here, and I thought it was a good showing, even though, he ended up getting, the TKO loss in the 9th. I thought he boxed well, and I thought, it was a great trip for him to come over here, for a British fighter to come over to, Abu Dhabi and fight somebody like, Rakimov. Rakimov obviously now has to, fight Joe Cordina, due to Joe Cordina winning it, getting injured, not being able to fight Rakimov. They kind of stripped him. And then obviously both fighters agreed to fight Joe Cordina when he comes back from injury. So that's going to be a good fight. You've got Rakimov, more of a slugger, more of a brawler in there with, Joe Cordina, who's definitely, I would say, more of a boxer. So it's going to be a good clash of styles whenever they get to do meet. I would imagine it's going to be the earlier part of 2023. But I think, Zelfa Barrett can come again, on only his second loss. And there's some big fighters as well in the UK for him. Joe Cordina, Anthony Kakachi, Zelfa Barrett himself. Get in there and fight, one of those guys, and then get back into the win column. And then it's a tough old division, Shakur Stevenson, Valdez, Shaki Foster. There's plenty of people, plenty of names to get in there and fight. So I don't think that loss, really affected Barrett, to be honest. I thought he gave a good account of himself.
Yeah, especially getting that knockdown against him. I think that kind of still gave him some credit. Like, hey, man, you went for it, and maybe there could be a rematch in the future. Who knows? But I mean, Rakimov, he's one of those guys again, Eastern European. He's the one who took. Didn't he take Jojo Diaz's title?
Was it majority draw? That one?
Oh, was that a draw?
It's one where Diaz,
he missed weight.
And then I believe it was, I think it was a majority draw. Yeah, 114, 114, 114, 114, and then 113, 115 to Rakimov. So majority draw that night.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. Also on the card, Chantel Cameron remains undefeated with the 10-round unanimous decision win over Jessica McCaskill. This was I'm assuming you can categorize this as an upset win. Chantel Cameron becomes the undisputed super lightweight champion of the world. Were you surprised about that?
No, if I remember rightly, I think I picked Chantel. I honestly think McCaskill is very, very limited. She's more of a brawler, doesn't really box. In terms of technique, she's pretty wild. Chantel Cameron, I thought, put on a boxing clinic, really, and just kind of kept a distance and just boxed her head off. I thought McCaskill looked pretty poor, to be honest with you. Kind of just shows the lack of depth in the women's division again, unfortunately. And good win for Chantel Cameron, and hopefully she gets, hopefully Katie Taylor, decides to step up to, super lightweight. You give her a big shot, because like we always say, I think every time, there's just isn't the names in there, unfortunately. So, you see the same people kind of going up and down weights, fighting for titles. McCaskill had to, moved weight for this one. Katie Taylor's going to have to move up and maybe fight Chantel Cameron. And then, Natasha Jonas she moved up, 2 or 3 weight divisions to win her world title a couple of months back. Unfortunately, at the minute, that's just what we see. But Chantel Cameron definitely, I thought, came of age that night. Great to see her pick up, the undisputed super lightweight world titles. And, fingers crossed for her. She gets to get in there with some big names and hopefully make some good money for her.
Yep, exactly. Also on that 5th of November, a couple Saturdays ago, from the Armory in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on Showtime, David Morale remains undefeated at 8-0 with a 12th round knockout over Idos. I forgot to say his name. Yerbisonuli. I heard them say it, but I couldn't remember. Morale retains his WBA I guess, regular interim super middleweight title. I mean, he's not the real champion. Canelo has a title, but WBA, PBC, you know, that makes sense. You know, broadcasters want some type of title on the line to appeal to casual viewers. It's easier to sell. That's where it's at. But before we kind of get into the analysis of this fight, you know, his opponent, I don't want to insult it by mispronouncing his name, but Ados, I'll just call him by his first name, Ados. You know, obviously suffered very serious and critical injury. I think, was it a brain bleed or what was it?
I believe so. I think he's still in hospital from the last time that we read, and hopefully we keep getting updated on it and it doesn't kind of slip away from people's memories. And unfortunately, it's part of the cruel world of boxing, and hopefully,
Right.
I don't think we want to put blame on everybody, like a lot of people have done. I think there's a lot of people to blame, and hopefully, we just kind of learn from it as a
Right. I mean, I think wasn't Tony Weeks.
Yeah, surprisingly, Tony Weeks, obviously somebody that you couldn't really get much more experienced referee in there, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, his corner's there, and I think us just watching as fans, we wanted him out of there. And I think even David Morrell was kind of surprised that he kept coming back for more. And Tony Weeks and the corner, I think should have, really have stepped in there and, saved Adios from himself. Unfortunately, I think he was just too brave and too much of a gladiator that night.
Right. And yeah, I think that's what it was. It was the gladiator spirit in him and maybe his team. I know there was a lot of criticism of Tony Weeks following the situation in the fight and obviously the hospitalization and the injury, which is unfortunate. It's surprising that somebody like Tony Weeks with his experience was the one involved in this, and that he should have stopped it. And we can put the blame on this person, that person, but either way, it's an unfortunate situation. I'm sure there's been an update, but I haven't seen a recent update regarding his condition, which I guess is semi good news. It didn't look good following the fight. I think a lot of people were bracing for the worst, but as of right now, at least from what I've heard, the last thing I heard, he's, like you said, he's still in the hospital. Maybe they're still working on him, doing surgeries and, trying to keep him going. But either way, we obviously wish him the best of luck from everybody here at the last round. David Morrell retains his, whatever you want to call it, WBA trinket. It's just a strap there just to kind of give him some type of recognition, because we all know, like I said, Canelo is the real champion, but the WBA, even though they said they would reduce these titles and take away these regular and all these belts, they haven't done it. So I think they just said it just to kind of appease the detractors and for marketing purposes, but it is what it is. But David Morrell, 8-0. Let's see where he goes from here. He still has a while to go. Also on the card, Brian Mendoza gets the 5th round KO over Jason Rosario, former unified champion Jason Rosario. What'd you think about Mendoza's win?
Great win. To me, I thought Rosario, with the purple, the patch that he had before, getting in there, those great fights. Was it last year? I thought he was going to come out ahead, but I think I'm right in saying that Rosario lost this and actually retired, straight after the fight. So an unbelievable win for Brian Mendoza. Really put himself into the landscape for some bigger fights in 2023. Great, and it was a great performance from him as well. And sorry to see kind of Rosario retire.
But he became unified, or was it undisputed? I don't know.
Yeah, those great fights that he had. So it's kind of sorry. I mean, maybe he'll change his mind. Maybe it was in the heat of the moment. Maybe it's in one of those ones where he thought, Mendoza was below him and he kind of overlooked him. And then the fact that he lost, maybe it was just something that he said. And, maybe in a week, 2 weeks from now, when he's calmed down and he's kind of like looked at the sphere and, he's still got plenty of years left in him, he might change his mind.
Yeah, he might. I think he's still not pretty young, but he's younger. So you never know. Get some time off, and then he's like, "Oh, I can still do this." So you never know. So going back to last Friday, the 11th of November, from the Sheffield Arena in Sheffield, Sonny Edwards remains undefeated with the unanimous decision win over 12 rounds against Felix Alvarado. Edwards retains his IBF flyweight world title. What do you think about Sonny's performance?
Great performance. Honestly, his last few performances, he's had unbelievable, really. And it's good to see that, he's boxing IQ, even though he doesn't have the power to go for knockouts, he always kind of makes it good to watch because, he'll drop his hands, he'll kind of get a little bit dangerous and you think like, oh, wow, like, pick your hands up. Like what happens if you get caught? But he still does that. He still has that showmanship, which still makes you want to watch, even though 99 times out of 100, it's going to go the full 12 rounds because he doesn't unfortunately have that power. But, he's in there with Felix Alvarado. That's his 41st fight. He's had double the amount of fights that Sonny Edwards had. And he's also been in, some big fights himself and been a world champion. I think he's a world champion at the division below, if I'm correct. So unbelievable performance from Sonny. And then hopefully now we'll see him in there with some of the big names. Hopefully.
Like who?
Martinez, obviously. That's been talked
That'd be
about. And I
great.
believe they were at the table trying to get that done. And for some reason, it didn't get done. Or another great fight that I think we'd all like to see. Bam. Get him in there with Bam Rodriguez.
That'd be great. Who do you think is more likely to be first? Bam Rodriguez or Martinez?
From I think what we saw last time when it looked like that was going to happen, obviously we don't know not what went on behind the scenes and why that fight didn't go ahead. I would say maybe Bam. Obviously, from what we've seen, he's not scared to fight anybody. So I think if they get to the table, I'm sure Bam's just like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. Like I don't care where. I think Sonny and him are both the same. Like they'd rather just have that fight, have the big fights, get the big paydays than really be pick and choose like who walks first. Who is it at? Is it in the UK or is it in the US? Even just do a 2-fight deal. One in the UK, one in the US, because there's not many people in and around those divisions for them to really fight. You want to just fight the big names, like we've said before, the flyweight division and the superfly. That's the only place you get the big purses is fighting Chocolatito, Martinez, Edwards, Rodriguez. So you really have to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, either way, I think Sonny Edwards is poised for a significant fight like that, whether it's against Martinez or Rodriguez. Either way, I think it's going to be a pretty decent payday in comparison to those weight classes for somebody like Sonny Edwards. Does he come to the United States for either of those fights?
I think he would. I don't think he seems the sort of person that would be put off by that. I think it's just he understands it's part and parcel of the job. And if it's a bigger purse in the US, then why not come here? I think right. Sonny and Bam, I think are the same. I don't think they'd care either way. I think they're both, kind of more old school and they want to just get the big fights done because Sonny showed us, by fighting the people that he's fought, that he kind of puts that mouth into action and he actually does it. He's not all talk.
Right, exactly. Moving on, this past Saturday, the 12th of November, from the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio, on DAZN, Steve Spark, in a crazy bout here, wins by disqualification over Montana Love. This was for the WB Intercontinental Super Lightweight titles. I mean, you could see if you watch the fight that Montana Love obviously got frustrated. He got knocked down in the fight, and I think that really kind of rattled his mentality in there, and he didn't know how to recover, so he just got upset and got frustrated. And then at one point when they were in close quarters there, they kind of locked up and Montana Love kind of just picked him up, like under his armpit or somewhere around there, and then literally walked him over to the ropes and like pushed him over. Luckily, Spark landed on his feet and just got right back into the ring. But obviously, Montana Love was upset. You could tell easily, and he got DQ'd. I mean, what'd you think about what'd you think about the fight as a whole, and then Montana Love's behavior?
I think you kind of summed it up well. Montana Love was losing the fight essentially. In a fight that I think was a homecoming kind of showcase for him on DAZN, and I'm sure that he was frustrated, maybe like a little bit embarrassed, kind of thinking like, man, I'm going to lose in front of my hometown against somebody that was probably a carefully selected opponent for him to really beat. And I think he just lost his head, a moment of madness, and he just kind of like, tried to throw him out the ring. Like you said, Spark landed on his feet, got back in, but the referee had seen enough, and was obviously thought it was deliberate and, rightfully disqualified, Montana Love, even though, Steven Spark wasn't injured by that because he landed on his feet. You can't go around just throwing people out of the ring. So I think the referee, rightly decided to take the course of action to disqualify him. And it's going to be interesting to see what Eddie Hearn and DAZN now decide to do with Montana Love. Is that one big mistake enough to be like, what, that's kind of it? Because the show didn't sell very well. It looked like the tickets were going stupid cheap, and they were trying to give them away. So and then also to have Montana Love do that, maybe they're thinking it's better to cut ties with him and let him move on.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunate. I mean, do you think that's likely that Eddie Hearn just cuts ties with him, even if he has additional fights on the contract?
I mean, you could, when he signed him, because I think I'm right. He came on he was on one of the undercards of one of the YouTube shows. I think it was the Triller one, and had a great performance on there. And that's where they decided to.
Oh, I think you're right. I remember that.
Yeah, I think they signed him from that, and he did look good. But I don't know what it was about this performance. Maybe it was just a badly selected opponent. But he looked out of sorts. He didn't really look like he knew how to deal with Spark. And I don't think Spark was, necessarily like an awkward opponent. Maybe it was just a bad camp or a bad week or something like that. But yeah, he didn't look like the sort of, Montana Love that we'd seen before. So maybe it was just a one-off, like a whole host of different things behind the scene that we don't know about. But it's going to be, interesting to see what Matchroom decide to do with him after that.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that maybe I'm wrong here, but I know Eddie Hearn was upset. He was bothered. He did, criticize it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Hearn does still give him another fight just to kind of rebound him. But give him another chance, I guess. And if he does it again, or if he exhibits behavior like that, or if he loses, then it's over. I think that's when you kind of really cut the cord there. But we will see. Maybe there's a rematch. Who knows? Maybe there's a rematch with Steve Spark.
Because remember our boy Anthony Sims Jr.
Exactly.
He had that one loss and kind of a surprise defeat, but to a good opponent, and that was it. Like, see ya. Never seen again on a Matchroom show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. Like he was getting some recognition, some attention, and very active online, and was cut and then just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I think he deleted like a lot of his social media accounts, and yeah, who knows? That was definitely unfortunate. And he's been on the show before, so if you guys listening, you guys can go back through our library and listen to an episode, because I know he was on at least once with us. Also, this past weekend from the Palms Casino Resort. Oh, the Palms get to fight now, huh? It's been a while since I've seen the Palms Casino fight. In Las Vegas, Nevada on ESPN Plus. Zhanibek, I'm just going to stick with his first name. Zhanibek retains his WBO middleweight title as he gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Denzel Bentley. Zhanibek obviously remains undefeated at 13-0. What'd you think about his victory?
Not the performance I think we were all expecting. I think a lot of people were thinking that Bentley was going to come over here, be completely outclassed by Zhanibek, because, it looked, for all intents and purposes, it looked like Andrade had avoided him, essentially, dropping the WBO middleweight title so he didn't have to fight Zhanibek. And it's interesting that I think it was the Fight Disciples I was listening to was saying they believe that, like Bivol, Usyk, and now Zhanibek have actually gone into certain fights and fought down, trying to get people to be like, okay, maybe Zhanibek isn't as good as we believe, which will then entice people to fight them. What's your opinion on that?
About Zhanibek, people refusing to fight him?
No, like Zhanibek going into this fight and say coasting in third gear, not looking that great. Kind of like how people said Usyk did that against like Chisora, Bivol maybe doing that against, Castillo, trying to be like, instead of going in there and blowing them out and then their opponents being like, well, hell no, I'm not fighting Zhanibek. It's because, I've heard other podcasts say stuff like that. And I've kind of thought, well, that's a kind of a risky game to play, to go in there against somebody and, fight in like third gear instead of just going in there and, beating them substantially, just trying to entice other opponents to fight them. You think that's there's a case for that at all?
I think if you're a casual fan, a casual viewer, obviously there's a case. Well, I don't want to call it a case, but for the entertainment perspective of the fight game, yes. For the financial side of the fight game, to increase your profile and all that, make more money, yes. But like you said, if you're in there and you're just stuck in third gear, but you're winning, and it's kind of like Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson kind of does that sometimes, where he's so good that you can tell he's like in a third gear or whatever, and he kind of just stays there because he knows like, oh, I can. It's like a sparring session to him. It's kind of sparring sessions to these guys, and it makes them better. Is it giving them more confidence in the moment? And because when they're fighting like that, they're in sparring in the gym, nobody's there, just their team or other selective spectators. But then you're doing that same thing in front of the camera on a big stage like ESPN or what have you, with the whole crowd there. Yeah, the crowd might not like it. They might want to see knockouts and all that stuff. But to you, like, oh, well, I can, this is how I sharpen my craft too. Like they see an opening, like, oh, I can end it when I want because I'm beating this guy. I've already figured him out. Or I can just stay in third gear for the remainder of the fight, 10 to 12 rounds, and sharpen my weaponry, I guess if you want to call it, the skills, and get better because of, the experience that I gain. Look at it like this way. Would you rather, if you're that fighter stuck in third gear and it's like the fourth round and you've already figured out your opponent and oh, okay, I know all his moves. I'm able to counter them. I can keep this going for the next 7-8 rounds or whatever, and gain more experience as a fighter, gain more rounds, et cetera, et cetera. Or would you rather, if after 3-4 rounds you're like, oh, okay, I can knock him out in the next round, and knock him out and it's over and it's an early night, and not have those rounds under your belt, that experience under your belt? How would you look at that? What would you think about that?
I just think it's risky because you could get caught.
Bro, right, of course. But there's, like I said, there's some fighters who have that swagger, like Shakur Stevenson, Zhanibek, Usyk, or these a lot of those Eastern European fighters. And obviously there's always that chance, but sometimes it happens where they're like, oh yeah, they're just so confident and they figure it out.
Yeah, it'd be good to have a fighter on, one that's been spoken about, and to ask them like, hey, did you purposely just like coast, and because you were you were clocking in the rounds, and it'd be interesting to see to get them on there, or for them just to say like, oh no, I was trying to get them out there, but I couldn't, so I just ended up going the full 12.
But it's also you're right, and I can see that, because we've seen answers like that before. But it's also, what if you've been inactive for like a year or more than a year, and you get in a fight, and after 2 rounds you kind of figured out your opponent, and you're like, oh, I can finish this guy. But you've been out of the ring for 12, 14, 15, 16 months or 20 months or whatever, and you're like, oh, well, I've been out of the ring. I kind of want to get some rounds in under the lights on TV instead of finishing this fight in 6 to 9 minutes, you know? So maybe that has something to do with it as well. You know, it makes you better, it makes you more confident, and it gives you that swagger. You know, like, oh, you know, I dodged this guy. I dodged him for 12 rounds, and I was accurate. I landed over 50% of my punches and blah, blah, blah. You know, the more rounds give you more experience, especially when you fight the higher level guys. You know, I mean, it's a back and forth situation. You know, it I think it just depends. Like you said, it depends on the fighter. It really depends on the fighter. The viewers want to see knockouts, they want to see stoppages and all that, but you know, the fighters are in there. They have to prepare for 12 rounds. You know, they did all that work in training camp. They stay in shape, or they try to stay in shape. But I mean, who knows? But yeah, Zhanibek's definitely a threat at 160 pounds. So we'll see if he ends up being like Bivol, where he doesn't get a shot. They just kind of block him out. But we will see. Also in the card, making her top rank debut after being with Golden Boy Promotions for so many years. Seniesa Estrada gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Jasmine Villarino. I hope I said that right. Estrada retains her WBA minimum weight world title. I mean, I think this is what everybody expected. Good for Seniesa. I know she was pretty vocal when she was with Golden Boy before she signed with Top Rank about getting the fight. She was on the sidelines. You know, I think what was bothering her, at least from, excuse me, at least from, you know, her statements and her tweets, her social media postings, was seeing these other female fighters get big paydays and big profiles like Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano at Madison Square Garden and all that, and Jake Paul being involved, and you know, a lot of female fighters kind of getting a lot of attention, and she wanted to be a part of that. And for some reason or another, her and Golden Boy weren't able to see eye to eye on things, or they weren't able to secure a fight for her, or what have you. I mean, who knows if she still had fights left on her deal, which seems like she did. And Golden Boy just kind of voluntarily terminated her contract so she can become a free agent, which, you know, is kind of admirable. And then Top Rank picked her up. I mean, what do you think about her debut under the Top Rank banner?
I'm a fan of her. I like her style. You know, she's kind of flashy, kind of similar to Sunny Edwards. You know, she's flashy because she doesn't really have the power to get a lot of girls out of there. So you still kind of want to watch because she's, you know, she's good to watch. She kind of drops her hands, same sort of thing as Sunny, where, you know, she kind of puts herself in danger a little bit, but she's got that style where she can, you know, kind of bob in and out of range. The fight itself, kind of pointless. I don't think she lost a second of it, really. You know, won every single round. But it was more of a showcase, I guess, even though she's now 23-0. It was more of a showcase because it was her first fight for Top Rank. Kind of do feel for her because there isn't many big fights in the minimum weight division because there isn't many big names in there. You know, it's kind of similar to the, you know, to those lower weight classes in men's boxing, I'm afraid. I think the only fight really for her is to get in there again with Marlon Esparza because, you know, there's genuine dislike between them two. So the build-up is good. And, you know, their fight the first time in Las Vegas, which was actually 3-minute rounds, if I remember correctly, was actually close. So I don't know why it's taken this long. I don't know, you know, Esparza, I believe, has picked up some world title in a weight class like in and around where Estrada is. So just do it again. You know, do 2 of them, do 3 of them, because she can fight these other world champions in the minimum weight division, but we have no idea who they are. They're not household names in the UK or in the US. You know, so she's picking up world titles, but they're against people like Jasmine Villarino. We don't know who they are. So I think probably the biggest fight, the biggest purse would be the rematch with Marlon Esparza.
How likely do you see that happening, though? I mean, obviously it's a lot more likely because Golden Boy and Top Rank do have a working relationship when they see potential. In, you know, they are friendly enough to make fights. But do we see that anytime soon? Do we see that in the next 9 to 12 months? Seniesa Estrada versus Marlon Esparza. And is it on DAZN? Is it on ESPN? Is there a cross promotion? I mean, obviously, there's not going to be a cross promotion, but because I feel like Golden Boy is going to try as hard as they can to raise Marlon Esparza's profile a lot more, because I think they know, okay, eventually these two might fight again. And it's going to come down to, okay, who's a more significant name, profile wise. Right now, I think it's Seniesa, but in the next 9 to 12 months or what have you, is Golden Boy going to try to elevate the profile of Esparza because they know, okay, that gives them leverage, just like they're doing with Ryan Garcia right now, what they've been doing with Ryan Garcia in terms of getting him fights against somebody like Tank Davis to kind of help their negotiation power. Is that what's going to happen?
The funny thing is we haven't heard of them call each other out for a while. So I would say that it doesn't look like it's really going to happen. And it's also funny that she decided to leave Golden Boy because Golden Boy signed, what's her name? Yokasta Valle, who now holds the WBO and the IBF minimum weight world titles, which are two of the titles that she needs. So you do wonder, why did you leave Golden Boy when they've got somebody that has two world titles in the same division as you? So it's kind of, that's kind of interesting.
That's true. That's really true. I mean, is it? You would think, did she vouch or did she make her voice heard to Golden Boy to say, "Hey, let me fight her. Let's unify." Did Golden Boy reject it, saying, "No, let's build her up a little bit more"? I mean, because Valle obviously had that fight in Mexico, and it seems like it was a pretty significant crowd on DAZN. Regardless, she obviously can show that she could draw out there. I mean, I wonder because I don't know if I've ever seen any reports about the relationship between her and Golden Boy. I think it was more like she wanted to fight and they couldn't find her an opponent in the meantime. And Valle, they gave her that fight in Mexico. She drew a significant crowd. It seemed like it was an exciting atmosphere. And Estrada was just kind of on the sidelines waiting for a fight. I mean, is it possible that Golden Boy said, "Oh no, we don't want to match you guys up together yet. One or two more fights for each of you, and then we'll match you up sometime next year, or what have you." I mean, you're right, because that's true. I mean, you have a person who has two belts in your division. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that Golden Boy just said "Oh no, we don't want to put you guys together yet," and Seniesa was just upset.
I think, and this is obviously just a random guess by looking at the landscape, that they had Valle, and I bet they said to Estrada, "Hey, if Valle wins these next few fights, we're going to put you in there for the WBA, the IBF, and the WBO minimum weight world titles." And I bet they gave her some type of contract or told her verbally, "Hey, this is the amount of money we're willing to pay you." And because of probably hearing the purses that Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano,
right,
Rachel Shields, I bet she said, "Hell no."
She was feeling left out.
Yeah, and she, and she wanted more money. But to put it into perspective of that division, the top 25 girls, the top 25 ladies in that division, there's only one American, which is Estrada, and there's no Brits. So every single time that she fights anybody, they're always, by looking at it, they're always either of Mexican descent or Japanese. And that's probably why those fights don't sell, unfortunately, in the US.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's a tough situation to be in. Luckily Estrada was able to be picked up by another prominent promoter in Top Rank, being on ESPN and all that. But let's see, is ESPN is Top Rank going to be able to deliver fights for her? I mean, does Estrada does it strike? I mean, obviously she doesn't strike me as the type of person to not want big fights. She wants to, whoever's a big name that's available or some type of significant name in her division or within or around her division, she would take it. But does she just want to be active? Does she not care who she fights as long as she's fighting? I mean, or does she want big names? She's turning down all these other fighters that are submitted to her or given to her, like, hey, we want you to fight this, and then she turns it down because she wants a big fight. I mean, like you said, she would, was she feeling left out because of the Serrano Taylor event? Obviously that they were getting a lot of attention. That was a huge event, big marketing with Jake Paul involved and all that. Was she hoping that Jake Paul would pick her up and put her alongside Amanda Serrano and kind of elevate her profile? Because obviously, I think it's fairly easy to say that Amanda Serrano, before she got, well, you tell me this, who was more well known before Jake Paul? Amanda Serrano or Seniesa Estrada?
I think I think Serrano.
You think so?
Yeah, just due to she's had substantially more fights. She's crossed over into MMA. Probably that due to the fact of also potential fights with Katie Taylor before. Obviously they were talked about back in the day when she was with DiBella as well. And then there's two of them. There's two Serranos as well. So you probably know one if you kind of like know the other and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say probably still Serrano, even though Seniesa's done commentary. She talks really well. I think she's definitely got a place for that. After she retires from fighting, I think she's really good at that. Her her breakdown of fights, her analysis, I think is really good.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely agree with that. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for somebody like Seniesa Estrada. Like, I don't see how Top Rank isn't going to be in the same situation that Golden Boy was in.
I just thought I'd have a look, just at the rankings in and around her, and like we just touched on, she fights at minimum weight. To get any kind of like household names, she really needs to move up. She has to move up 2 weight divisions to Marlon, because that flyweight has Marlon Esparza, Ali Mucano, who fights with Joel Diaz. You've got Annabelle Ortiz, Gabriel Fundora, Sulem, is it Ubina? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Sulem. Kenia Anikarez. Yeah, she needs to move up, unfortunately for her, because I'm sure it's like 2 weight divisions above her natural fighting weight to get those bigger fights and bigger purses. I would hazard a guess that.
I mean, I'm assuming Top Rank is, I don't know, maybe Top Rank is trying to convince her, like, hey, we need you to move up. You want these bigger fights, but we need, we're going to need you to move up to get these, these, I guess, more significant names. Maybe she's not comfortable moving up, or maybe she's like, oh, I can't move up. This is my ceiling, or something like that. I don't know. We don't know. We're just speculating here, but maybe Golden Boy was trying the same thing. Like, hey, can you move up? And she said no, or she said, no, I can't. This is my ceiling. Who knows? Because obviously that's happened. I mean, like, for example, Lomachenko, I think all the hardcore boxing fans can tell that 135 is his ceiling, right? If he goes to 140, those guys are going to be way too big for him in terms of size, and his skill can only take him so far, right? So maybe she's the same. We don't know. But either way, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how her career is navigated with Top Rank. Are they just going to keeping her active? Does she just want to stay active, or does she want significant names, or what are we looking at here? So definitely going to be interesting. Moving on to fight previews. This upcoming Saturday, the 19th of November, from Guadalajara. I can never say that right, and I'm Mexican. I can speak Spanish. Jalisco, Mexico. Jaime Munguia returns since his fight here in Southern California months back against Gonzalo Gaston Correa, 21-5. When this was announced, Golden Boy, Munguia was getting a lot of pushback, a lot of criticism, because Munguia, obviously, we want to see him with a significant name. Several months ago, there was talk of Charlo and going back and forth. And then even Steven Espinoza chimed in on Twitter saying there was negotiations and it wasn't working out. And so obviously there was talks there, at least somewhere, and it didn't work out. I remember when we went to Munguia's fight this last time, earlier this year, I asked him in the locker room in the back after the fight, like, hey, are we going to see you with a significant name soon? And he's like, hopefully by the end of the year. That's what he said. God willing, I think I'm remembering it right. I think he said, God willing, by the end of the year. Well, obviously that's not happening, but where are we going to see him? Where are we going to see him next year? Is he still going to be stuck? Like, is he going to be like a Bivol, stuck on the outside, or what are we looking at here?
It's an interesting question, because I think for the longest time we've really been wanting Munguia in with some bigger names and some harder tests, because he is active. Look how young he is, and he's had 40 fights. But it's just now and again we seem to get him in there with these guys like the Jimmy Kellys. I thought the Rosado fight was a good fight, but then now he's in with the Gonzalo Gaston Correa, and it's like, come on, dude. Like, I think even Dan Rafael, when it got announced, reposted it from Golden Boy and was like, who? And Dan Rafael's been around the boxing business for how long? So if all these guys, don't know who they are, then us, and also even your casual fans are going to be like, who the hell is this guy? And they haven't even really promoted this fight. It's like they're kind of just giving him just another little gimme. Maybe he has a contract where he has to get a certain amount of fights, in within a year. So they're just giving him this one. But yeah, I think, definitely sooner rather than later, we need to see him in there with some of these bigger names. And some
I think it's
tests.
a lot sooner than that. I think it's, him and, Ramirez. Are we going to? Ramirez took Ramirez 44 fights. I know he was top rank, and there was that relationship was severed. So they, he left and he got signed by Golden Boy and all that. But I don't know. Are we going to see Munguia get to 44 fights as well before he gets a significant name? It's possible. I think you're muted. You're talking to yourself. But anyway,
sorry,
there you are.
It seems like it seems for some reason that De La Hoya seems to want to challenge Mayweather for his unbeaten record, like he did with Ramirez, and then now Ramirez has obviously lost that. It's looking like maybe he's going to try and do the same thing with Munguia. But I think you're starting to see it from fans and also journalists that it's not what we want to see. We're noticing that the record is obviously very padded, and we want to see him in there with tests now. It's fans are paying good money, to go out there, to drive there, to get rooms, pay for the tickets, and we don't want to see him in there, over and over again with just some, knockover jobs that we don't really know who they are.
I'm sure, just like Golden Boy hoped that Ramirez would beat Bivol and somehow entice Canelo Alvarez into a matchup, an all-Mexican war between Ramirez and Canelo. I'm sure Golden Boy is still hoping that happens with Munguia. He's at 160 pounds. He's a big kid. He could eventually move up to 168 sooner rather than later. We don't, I'm sure if there was a big opportunity, they would easily consider it. But I think Golden Boy is really hoping that now that the Ramirez train has kind of slowed down in terms of the Canelo sweepstakes, they're hoping that Munguia kind of jumps on that train and kind of takes over, because obviously that's the goal. They had Golden Boy and De La Hoya had Canelo for so long. They were the train. But now they're the ones trying to chase the Canelo train. And it's Eddie Hearn and Canelo who are navigating through the seas, I guess, if you want to use that analogy. But we will see. Moving on, the WBC also had their annual, what do you call it, convention.
60th annual convention.
Yeah, they've had it for, this is the 6th year. They've had it for 6 years or something like that.
60th.
60th. Oh my God. It has been that long. That's insane. So these are just some of the fights that they had ordered. Mind you, before we started recording, take this all with a grain of salt. If you're, listening to us, take these official orders from the WBC with a grain of salt. Because if you look back in the past, over the last several years, there's a lot of fights that they've ordered with a lot of significant names, like the ones I'm about to mention, that never happened and still have not happened to this day. So at the end of the day, they can order it, but if the fighters that they're ordering have a lot of financial power and the promoters that they're with have a lot of pull, the broadcaster has a lot of pull, has a lot of power, these orders don't mean anything. They really don't. They really don't. So people can get all excited. Oh my God, the WBC ordered it. Don't get excited for that. Take it all with a grain of salt, because a lot of these fights never end up happening. They never end up happening. So here are some of the fights. The first one will likely happen. It seems like it will probably likely happen. Wilder versus Ruiz. That's what they ordered. The second one, Errol Spence, Keith Thurman. That's also likely. Both of those fights are likely because they're all PBC fighters. So in the next 6 to 9 months, they're lucky. David Benavidez, Caleb Plant. That's also both PBC fighters. Shakur Stevenson, Isaac Cruz. That has no chance of happening. That has no chance of happening. You think that's going to happen? I don't think it's going to happen. Cruz is a PBC fighter. Stevenson's a top-ranked fighter.
I could see it just due to Haney v. Loma, because obviously, Bob Arum, we know how much Bob Arum loves.
I don't see it. I do not see it.
I think that maybe Shakur's like, you know what? Like, that gives me like a fight to do in between. I'll probably.
Well, yeah, for Shakur, I think Shakur would have no problem. And if you ask Cruz would have no problem either. I think he's, Mexican warrior. But I think it's the promoter politics. That's what it is.
Blocked out.
Yeah. Why do you think the first three? I mean, you don't think the WBC, before they officially announced these ordered fights, and I say that in quotations, they're like, oh, okay, well, Wilder, Ruiz, Spence, Thurman, Benavidez, Plant, those are all safe bets because they're all under one banner. That's logical. But when they get to Shakur Stevens and Isaac Cruz, okay, there's one that 99% chance is not going to happen. Here's another one. Teofimo Lopez, Sandor Martin. Maybe, but probably not. Probably not. I feel like so Lopez isn't he did he just fight or is he returning soon?
He fights December 9th.
December 9th. Okay, he fights December against Jose Pedraza, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unless Top Rank wants to keep him another fight to kind of get his bearings at 140, maybe. Because Sandor Martin is, I don't think he signed anybody. I know he beat Mikey Garcia, but
I think he might have options with Matchroom after beating Mikey.
Yeah, because he hasn't fought since then, right?
Not on any big stage. He may have been on some random card in Spain.
I think he was at one random card like in Argentina or somewhere in another country. I just don't see that. I feel like Top Rank and Teofimo Lopez are going to be like, no, we don't want to fight that guy. And it's not because they're afraid of him. I just think that, no bang for your buck. So I don't think that fight's going to happen either. And then another one, Sebastian Fondura, Tony Harrison.
Great fight.
That's a great fight.
Yeah.
But what's the common theme in all in some of these fights that I just named? A lot of them are all PBC.
It's probably not even.
That's not a coincidence.
Yeah, Al Heyman probably told Suleiman.
Oh yeah, somebody made a call like, "Hey, say this," or WBC, like, "Hey, let's put these guys together." Because if you look back a couple years ago, or a lot of the last several years, there's a lot of fights that they ordered according to their quote unquote rankings, where they order a lot of fights between fighters with different promoters, and they never happen. That's why I said take it with a grain of salt. But now, at least this year, did they kind of learn their lesson? Like, hey, let's we have a really bad history of getting these fights to happen. It feels like we don't have any credibility or we don't have any authority in boxing. So let's be selective here and order these fights. Let's order these fights that already have a really good chance of happening. And then we're gonna be like, oh yeah, look, well, we ordered that fight and look at it, it happened. It happened. They can go back to that, like, oh no, look, our track record is pretty solid. We ordered these fights and they happened. Yeah, you're right. But was it strategic? Most likely. Most likely. But yeah, take that all with a grain of salt. And we'll see how in the months ahead what happens. News and notes: Floyd Mayweather Jr. returned in another exhibition fight as he stopped a YouTuber, Deji. I'm not gonna even try his last name. He stopped him in the 6th round of an exhibition boxing fight in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Jake Paul was also not Jake Paul. Jake Paul wasn't there. He was there. Jake Paul was there. I know Tyson Fury or Tommy Fury was also there. So I think there's a lot of drama right there and stuff like that. There's no surprise here. Mayweather been doing exhibitions. They're paying him. Got to give him credit. He put in the work for all these years as a real fighter, coming up the hard way, and now they're just paying him to have these exhibitions against guys that, even at 45 years old or however old he is, he's just playing with. So we will see. And then one of the most infamous sporting scandals of the 1990s will be commercialized in a new line of cannabis-infused edibles. That's right, I said cannabis. This isn't a commercial here. I did say that. I did say that. It was announced earlier this week that heavyweight greats, the former blood rivals and the earshot rivals, I guess if you want to use that as a pun, Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield have come together for a new cannabis company called Karma Holdings, which also includes Tyson's existing cannabis ventures and all that. I think one of the funny ones, and we're not sponsoring this, or they're not paying us for this. We're just talking about this because it's funny. But one of the first products that they have is called Holy Ears, which is a play on words. Mike Tyson biting Holyfield in the 90s and all that. So I think that's very, good for them. As long as they're not hurting anybody and they kind of get along now after hating each other for so long. If they can get along, everybody else can. There's a chance. There is a chance. And Tank Davis's return in January seems like it might happen. He always posts cryptic tweets and posts, but he did put in a recent post on social media, January, like the first 3 letters of January, the acronym Jan, and then so it seems like January he might have a fight lined up. Is it going to be Ryan Garcia? We don't know, but he did put January, and then he put DC, which people are taking as Washington DC. So there's something cryptic there. He might have something lined up. Maybe it'll be announced in the next couple weeks or so. Maybe in the next 2 weeks or so. Would have to announce it pretty soon, right? If it's in January. Real quickly, is that going to be Ryan Garcia or not?
I hope so. Put it that way.
In Washington, D.C.?
Maybe they're just thinking that they're going to draw a big crowd there. But in all honesty, probably not, because I think that fight probably needs a big-ish, run-up, a lot of PR. I think with the amount of fans that they both have. And the look that we get on those sorts of fights, it's probably not going to be Ryan Garcia v. Gervonta Davis.
Yeah, we'll see. We will see. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of the Last Round podcast. I know next week is a holiday week here in the United States. We're still planning to bring you an episode, at least as of right now. But obviously holidays affect people's schedules and stuff. But as of right now, we are planning to bring you an episode for next week. Don't forget, guys, we have shirts and all that stuff available at Fit Warrior Brand. Check out our links on our social handles, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, Facebook. We have a linktree.com account that has all of our stuff, where to listen to us, check out our merchandise and all that stuff, social media account handles, and everything. Go check it out. Support us. Keep listening. Reach out to us. Email us. Tweet us. Send us a direct message. Let us know what you think. Let us know who you'd like to see on or listen on here on the last round, and we'll take it into consideration and see what we can do. But as we sign off here for this week's episode, 200 episodes of weekly episodes here at the last round. Mike, go ahead and let them know once again where they can find us and follow us.
And we are at the last round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing Zach Parker, John Ryder, Dillian White, Jermaine Franklin, and then the big one from the War Grounds in Carson, California, Jose Zepeda against Regis Prograis.
Marv Nation, huh? Allegedly, maybe Pro Bellum behind it. Who knows? Something's going on there. Something is definitely going on there. So for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is the last round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is the Last Round Podcast.